So sometimes I found accountability to be a bit of a buzzword. It's something that I think feels nice to think we've done and feel like we have a quick chat with someone and that's us being accountable. But ultimately, it's something that we encourage kicking tasks down the road and not actually getting done what we said we'd do in the first place, because then we miss bedtime again and we're home late from work again. And we find ourselves quickly returning to bad habits that we said, I won't do that again, never again. I'm moving away from it. I'll do it next time. The lack of accountability for me promotes that happening. And JJ Emmanuel, who you can see on screen, or you'll hear from very shortly, is a registered psychotherapist who specializes in helping men partly be accountable to themselves, others, and in their actions. So I'm delighted to dig into accountability as a specific topic to help us busy working dads bring the best of themselves to work and to home. JJ, thank you for joining us this morning, this afternoon. Yeah, I do get lost in the time zones. Tell us about yourself, your work, your focus on working with men specifically. What led you to this, and tell us a bit around that.
Yeah, so about me, I'm Canadian, born on the West Coast, now live on the East Coast. So born in Vancouver, now live in Toronto. Very different ends of the country. Vancouver is more like the laid back, chilled vibe. Toronto's more the hustle bustle city. And then just with my career, how I've kind of gone into the men's mental health space, there is definitely a shortage of emotional education and language for men in the world globally. Like it's definitely where I am, but I've heard it from all different corners of the world. And me having an interest in helping people to create some kind of emotional awareness or accountability, like we're talking about today, or empathy, compassion, all kind of those buzzwords. I'm becoming a psychotherapist, so entering this world that kind of it put this spotlight on an experience that all men, many men seem to have, which is that lack of emotional, the ability to express emotionally, or the ability to understand emotions or identify emotions. And it's an experience that I share. I don't mean to say like I'm the expert and the rest of the men are my students. So yeah, that's kind of like how I got into what I'm doing. And that's kind of why I do what I do.
So almost your own personal experiences opened up the door to realize that it's not just you. Because I think when I first became a dad, I thought, my God, this is difficult, right? This is hard. But I couldn't. And part of why the Dads in Business Project exists is because I felt I couldn't show that weakness to my wife at home, or I felt I had to go back to work and say everything is fine. And I couldn't talk about it in my social circles. So we internalize everything and we can't talk about things in that way. So we have to man up, or we have to just get on with it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's the same across the Atlantic where you are. Those stigmas and perceptions still exist, do they not?
Definitely. Yeah, I'm a new dad. My wife gave birth to our son in February.
Congratulations.
So he's 8 months old. Thank you. And yeah, that experience is totally what your experience clicks with me totally. Like just that experience of being a new dad, knowing everything's anxious, knowing everything's going to be turned upside down, knowing my wife is dealing with all the feelings and difficulties that come with post-birth, all of that, and still thinking and again, being involved in the mental health space, and still myself telling myself, no, but you're the guy, you're the dad, you got to be okay, you got to make sure everything's okay, and don't let anybody else know that you're not okay, because
exactly.
what's that going to say about you?
Don't you dare show weakness. How dare you?
Yeah.
I was chatting to someone I know early this week, and they're going through a lot of stressors. And he just said to me very openly, where do I turn? I'm supporting everyone else in my circle, but where do I go? And it's It's so common. And I just think by having conversations, hopefully like this and the work that you're doing, where there's most definitely the need, and hopefully the Dads in Business Project and others like it can promote that conversation, because it's just not happening as it should.
Yeah.
And I think as we normalize a conversation, as you say, it's not about me preaching at you. I'm in the same boat as you.
Yeah,
Let's
totally.
figure this out together. I think that's quite an important point, isn't it?
Very much so. And again, like I like that you say that, just having this space to speak to each other and to kind of show what it's like to do that on such an open and vulnerable stage, like the one you're giving me to speak on. I think that's so important.
Interesting point. So it's almost showing what normal can look like without keeping it a secret anymore. It's showing what can be possible. It's interesting perception. Shall we dive on with what we're supposed to talk about today?
Sure, let's do it.
JJ, in its simplest form, we're here to talk about accountability. I mentioned in the introduction, it can sometimes feel a bit like it's ephemeral, or it doesn't really exist. It's intangible. So in its simplest form, what, in your experience and opinion, is accountability? Can you give us a bit of a line in the sand definition around it?
Yeah. So the way I frame accountability is creating an awareness of the self that can help you to generate a set of values, and then a system that allows you to use those values to identify goals, and then sticking to those goals to keep moving forward. I think that would be like the simplest definition I would give.
No, that's clear. I like that. It's that's probably the most refreshing example of accountability that I've heard. It's very value driven. It's very connected to almost a purpose, and perhaps that drives back to, again, the introduction where I said, where people will say they work late again, they miss bedtime again, because they're not connected enough to their values. Perhaps that might drive lack of accountability. I'm sure that's where we might unpack a little bit more. Is there a difference between accountability and responsibility?
A good question. So I think so. I think in my definition of accountability, at least, there's a difference. Responsibilities are things that have to be taken care of, and sometimes they fall outside of that zone of what you really need to be accountable for. So there may be, accountability, let's say you have a system of values. Unless you've aligned your responsibilities with those values and you've connected them to your internal processing system, your responsibilities are probably different than your accountabilities. But I think in order to live most effectively, you'd probably want to find a way to align your responsibilities with your feeling of accountability, if that makes sense.
It does. And thanks for taking the challenge of answering that as you have, because I think the two quite naturally get blurred or confused. And I think we can absolve responsibility or absolve accountability in lieu of the other almost. And I think tying back to accountability as our value base, I think is very important. And I think an early catch to underline in the conversation today. Why do men and dads struggle with it so much, do you think, JJ? What's missing? Because you specialize in this space around men specifically. We've unpacked a couple of stigmas that exist between yourself and my experiences. So why are men uniquely different or uniquely struggling in this way to be accountable? What are you hearing? What are you experiencing?
Well, one of the reasons that I think is something we've kind of touched on already, which is that the pressure to be the man, the pressure to be the dad, the husband, and when you have pressure without alignment, then you you start to resent what you're doing. So I think a lot of times what happens is that we allow that kind of external pressure to dictate our actions, and then we may be doing things that if we were to take a second and think about how they align, they might feel very connected, but they're not done in an aligned or connected way. And then we start to drift off the path. And that's where it becomes, I'm late to come home. I didn't clean up dinner yet. We're working on somebody else's clock, on somebody else's expectations, which, like, going back to that the accountability versus responsibility, of course you need to. You're in a marriage, you need to look after your wife. You're a father, you need to look after your child 100%. But the more that you can bring that close to yourself and to your personal set of values and create those checks and balances for yourself, the more connected you'll feel, and the more consistent you'll be able to be.
I was just scribbling a few notes while you were speaking there, and I think what I was hearing there is something often referred to as the should gremlins. I used to go to like the schoolyard or something, and they'd say, Rob should be doing more of this, or Rob should really be helping out more at home, or Rob should be at work more often, or the kids shouldn't be watching YouTube, or the kids should be watching YouTube. And it's like it's so conflicting, and it's hard to, I guess, deflect external opinions in what you do. And I could almost see a time when I was very much living on other people's expectations, and I didn't know what on earth I should be doing anyway. So what do we do? How do we start honing in on that? If people are listening and think, well, hang on, everything that I've just heard is exactly me. Where can we start to become more in tune with that? Where would you suggest someone starts to identify those values that report to them, and I guess at least their partner at home and their kids?
I think you identified the perfect place to start already. And actually, it's funny because my supervisor calls the shoulds, he calls that the shoulder. Like when we talk about it, he calls it the shoulder. Yeah, here goes the shoulder again. I'll be complaining about a case or something, what I did wrong. There goes the shoulder. So I think that's a very good thing, to be aware of the language you use when you're talking to yourself. When you notice that you're telling yourself, I should have done this, or I should have done that, or why couldn't I have done better? Or when you're bullying yourself, when you notice those words that are taking away from your experience and they're making you feel small, that's a very good place to start to see, okay, well, why am I doing this? What am I doing this for? Who am I doing this for? And you can kind of work backwards from there.
Yeah, one thing I've tried to put in practice, and this was one of my colleagues on the Dad's project here, is he was talking about agreements and expectations. So it's almost like work with those closest to you to agree that, okay, I'm going to be out late because life happens. So I am going to be working late 3 nights this week. We agree that the expectation is I'll be at home the other 4 nights this week. So we have to be grown up enough to appreciate that life happens, I guess. And things do get in the way, and there'll be peaks and troughs in our work. And I think in my sort of, I guess, earlier years of being a dad, my kids were only 9, 7, and 5 at the time of recording. It was such a steep learning curve. And I was shouldering or internalizing a lot of things where I'd think, I'll do it. But then that's impacting on everything else, because I was home from work late, or I'd go out again to a networking session or something, and because that's what I had to do. And I wasn't sharing that or setting any agreements with anyone. So I guess in a roundabout way, JJ, my question is, does sharing our own, what we might otherwise internalize, issues and problems, does that help build accountability?
I think so. Because again, I think what it can do is it can help, once you've stated what you're feeling, what you're planning, what you're thinking, then that's another way of identifying what it is that you actually need to do, or what you expect from yourself. And I wanted to add in on the other side of that also. I think sometimes what gets lost in this kind of scenario is that we set expectations, or we put ourselves in a situation where I've done all the things right to have a settled or calm space. And let's say specifically with our spouses. And then we forget that part of the accountability piece is recognizing that I'm also supposed to be there for my spouse, and what I've done to create a safe kind of set of expectations and follow through on those doesn't take away their ability to have feelings about it still. Like they could still be angry about me being home late, or they could still be let down by me not cleaning the dishes. Just, you know what I mean? Like there's still that relationship aspect that you can't manipulate it. What you can do is, I think, like what you're saying, is give yourself that space for accountability and create expectations about what you're doing, but that's only there to empower your ability to support the other. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think there's some big emotions that come out of that, because, like you say, in my example, I would say everything I do at work and professionally, yes, it fulfills me, but ultimately it's to provide for my home, my wife, my kids. I want them to be able to do whatever it is they want to do through the work that I do. And I think sometimes when the decisions that you make professionally conflict with how that makes those at home feel, that can really come out as guilt or anxiety, or, oh God, I feel terrible, maybe I shouldn't have done that. So there's a real push and pull in that agreements and expectations space. And I guess, how do you stay true to doing what it is that you feel is right versus the risk of, because people are going to get upset, right? Do we just have to be grown up enough to appreciate that and look bigger picture? Or sometimes do we have to check in with ourselves and say, hang on, is the upset that this is causing worth what I've decided I want to do? Do you know what I mean? There's like guilt, there's a sense of selfishness around that. There's a sense of, I'm telling the family what we're doing. So a lot to unpack there in an emotional level that perhaps challenges our values.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I think there's part of it is recognizing, okay, if I'm making a decision that's going to negatively impact my family, so is that coming from a place of selfishness? Likely, if I know that's going to negatively impact the overall picture, the long term, the short term. But if I look at it and I say, okay, is this going to cause something that is going to make me uncomfortable and make this space uncomfortable, but it's actually going to be for the betterment or for the growth of this big picture? Okay, so maybe it's something that I have to do, but that also compels me to be accepting of whatever comes my way because of it in the short term. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's important to recognize, okay, am I making a selfish decision? In which case that will look selfish in the long term. That's not gonna, there's nothing is gonna grow from that. But if it's something that's uncomfortable, discomfort is a good space to be in, because it can really help you to move up and to grow out. And that's just based on our ability to accept that discomfort. And that means accepting the discomfort of our spouses and our children and being open to it.
How, and forgive me if I'm going curveball on this one, but how do we recognize discomfort versus guilt?
So guilt, again, I think guilt, so guilt can be discomfort. Like there could be, again, I think we can even split this down even more. I think there can be good feelings of guilt and bad feelings of guilt. The bad feelings of guilt are the ones that are pulling you down and pulling you away from your values. So they're gonna prevent you from saying sorry. They're gonna give you excuses. They're going to make you say things you don't want to say to your family. The good feelings of guilt, if we want to call it that, or discomfort, those are going to be the ones that are pulling you toward your goals and your values. Those are going to be the ones that are telling you, hey, maybe I should reconsider how I said that. Maybe my wife is now sad because of what I did. Those are the ones that start to be softer, that allow you to be accountable. I think that would be kind of the difference between the discomfort and the guilt. But we conflate those. Like, we put those together all the time, because the discomfort is, I want to get out of it. How do I get out of it? The easiest way out is explain it away, or to write yourself off. But there's power to guilt. There's an importance to it, I think.
There's an importance to guilt. I like the framing of good guilt and bad guilt. So you can still feel guilty even though you know you're making the right decision. I will address how I communicate that to my partner or those that are important to me. But there's bad guilt where you might think, I've just made a bad decision here and now I feel terrible about it.
Yeah, and it doesn't do anything for you. It doesn't serve you. It only pulls you down.
And
if it's not, and pulling you down means it's pulling you away from your relationship with your kids, or away from the relationship with your wife, away from your relationship with or a positive relationship with yourself. And you fall quickly into the should've. You start doing that to yourself, and that's a quick spiral.
No, it is. I really like that good guilt and bad guilt framing. I think that's very powerful. How important do you think goals are, and clear goals, for ourselves, but also those at home, in I guess building that accountability and, to a point, responsibility, but avoiding the guilt, setting goals, having that conversation and shared experience and shared goal? How important is that in playing back to the accountability topic?
I think having a vision of what you want to look like, or what you want to see yourself as, is extremely powerful. I actually have a rabbi who once told me that you have those golden days of dating, and then you get into engagement and marriage, and maybe it starts getting a little harder as things move on. But there's that golden feeling of like, wow, this is amazing. I found this person. And he said to me that you're given that experience so that you know what it can be like, so that you know what you're driving toward. You start off with this burst of joy and infatuation, and that shows you who you can be as a couple, who you can be on your own, shows you your best qualities, and they really stand out. So I think goals can be like that, because if you really have a goal, you're dreaming, you're giving yourself the ability to say, I know what I can be. I know, which means I know who I am. I just need to kind of unlock that and massage that so that it has space. So I think whatever gives you the ability to be kind to yourself, to see yourself as a purposeful, meaningful player in the world, will be beneficial to accountability. And goals, I think, are one of the top.
And do you find that men often sleepwalk through life? Are we just drifting, or is there an avoidance, or I guess an unawareness of goals? We just get on with it. I get up, I go to work, I go home, I'll eat, and I'll go to bed, and I'll repeat the process. Are we sleepwalking as men? Do you find there's a prevalence of that?
Definitely. Yeah, because it's easy to just identify with the roles that are manly. I mean, maybe things are a little different these days, but like the classic male role, I put the bread on the table, I build the bunk bed, then I check. I'm the guy. And yeah, you think you're engaged, you think you're doing all the things you need to do. I'm speaking for myself. And yet, yeah, very much so. Sleepwalking I think it's the right analogy.
And where would you challenge men to start snapping themselves out of it a bit? Is there an aha moment that you see from the men you speak to that makes them realize, hang on, I'm sleepwalking here. I need to connect back to values. I need to set goals. I need to be accountable. Is there a moment that happens, or is it a gradual process, or is there a certain question you ask that makes them see, hang on, I need to check in with myself here. I'm disconnected from that euphoric moment. I don't know where that's gone.
Yeah, I think there's for me in my work, I guess there are different levels of readiness. There's going to be different levels, different kinds of people coming in, people who are quite far down the line in terms of being very certain about what the issue is. They may be wrong, but they're very kind of emotionally connected. And then you'll have people who are just there because things aren't going right. And I don't know why, and it's really frustrating. And they don't even want me to ask them questions. So it's like there's a lot of work just to get to a place where questions are comfortable.
Wow.
But I think that a good place to start is to consider, how do I feel about what I'm doing? Not how do I measure it? Not am I successful? Not does it fit the box of being good, but how do I feel about the results I'm producing? And I know when I ask myself that, sometimes I feel no connection to it at all. And then I'm like, well, because I'm a husband and I'm a father and I really love my family. And I'm a son too, and I'm a brother. And I really love, those are things that are extremely important to me. And yet I'm serving those relationships. And sometimes I'm like, well, I don't feel anything from this. I don't feel good or bad. I just don't feel much at all. So then I have to ask myself, well, what would it take to feel more something from that? Probably would take me actually investing myself into it, or taking a step back and allowing myself to see what I want. Like maybe more involvement, maybe less involvement, but at least to know I should have a feeling about this. And if I don't, or if the feeling feels off, maybe that's a good place to start to see, maybe I need to reevaluate.
Thanks for sharing your own perception there, because I can resonate with that sort of, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think sometimes it can be a bit like, well, what am I supposed to do or feel? I don't know. And I guess that, I think what you're suggesting is that's where we can check in with ourselves and think, well, what do you want to feel?
Yeah.
What is it you want to feel? So we can work towards that. And I guess that's where I'm working this through in my head, because I get in this position sometimes myself. How do you work through that yourself? Can you work through that yourself? What's a framework or a start to think, hang on, I know I didn't feel good or I didn't feel bad, it just is. I know I want to feel different. Something's got to give elsewhere. That's going to introduce feelings of guilt or choice. How do we break the mold? Or how do we start to break the mold? I know I want to be different. What's the first step? If we're on our own, we don't have an accountability part, which we'll come on to, what would you suggest to someone to get started in reassessing their values, perhaps?
Yes, I mean, one element, and not to market my business, but having a therapist is just a very effective tool for self-exploration when nothing's going wrong. Like sometimes it's just effective to have somebody to go to, like you're saying, just to be able to reflect with. Like I can share, I can pull those feelings out, and I don't know what to do with them, and just sometimes helps to have somebody who can just kind of reframe that for you. Like, I hear what you're saying. I'm not going to add anything else into it. I'm just going to try and flip it around, maybe work the pieces out a little differently so that you have some more clarity for yourself. In terms of things you can do for yourself, I think journaling is one of the most powerful tools there are. And the kind of structure that I think can help to access those points of, well, what do I feel, or what do I want to feel? Is just asking yourself the questions: what happened today? What did I feel about that? What did it say about me? That structure, because you're acknowledging kind of the external, you're acknowledging your feelings, and then you're acknowledging the relationship you have with your feelings. And once you're at that point of acknowledging that relationship you have with your feelings, you can start to confront what you want to feel, which is it's a tricky place to go. And that's why I say sometimes it might be effective to go to a therapist, or if you have a really great friend who you feel can do the same thing for you, or an accountability partner. I think those are great ideas.
And is journaling, is that just like what is journaling in your definition? Is it like a diary of a day to day, or is it there to be almost like your space to almost coach yourself?
I think it's both. I think part of it is just it's a therapeutic experience on its own, just to be able to write down what happened, because we get so cluttered and we're always moving from one thing to the next. We don't give ourselves the space to experience what just happened when it happened, and we don't give ourselves the experience to the room to experience what happened afterwards. So I think in one sense it's just a journal, just dear diary, this is what happened. And the other way, yeah, it's like self-coaching, I think.
Yeah, one of my biggest bugbears of myself, or weaknesses of myself, is I work towards a goal or a project or a win at work or at home. It'll happen, and I'll just go, right, what's next?
Yeah.
What's next? I won't stop to, as you just highlighted, reflect, give it time, give it space, whatever it needs to sink in. It's just, right, what's next? Where can we go again? And my wife will say, well, that's just your character. So can it be just your character to do that? Or are we at risk of bypassing what we need to be connecting with?
I think some people are more geared to being forward thinking. How do I move? How do I accomplish more? I think there's definitely something to that. Some people are more, feely. They want to be more in the past. Some people are more practical. How do I accomplish? How do I build? But I do think like something like a journal, like the one I described, just taking the time to explore what you're feeling about the day and what you feel about yourself because of that day. I think that gives you the ability to, okay, I'm moving forward, but I'm also giving myself time to and room to just experience what's happening right now. So I think yeah, it can be part of your character, but it can also be learned.
Because I guess it's just windows of time. Give us 15 minutes, 10 minutes,
3 minutes. Stand. How long does it take you to shower? You don't even need to write a journal. Just stand in the shower and talk to yourself a little bit about what happened today, what you're feeling about it. And if you feel you're allowed to feel what you're feeling about it, that's a question that we don't ask ourselves enough. Do I think that I'm allowed to feel what I'm feeling? That's a tricky one.
Do I think I'm allowed to feel what I'm feeling?
I'll give you an example. Something tragic happens on the street. Somebody gets assaulted, and a bystander witnesses this assault, totally helpless, had nothing, they couldn't do anything about it, but they saw it happen. Now the other person's there bleeding and needs to go to the hospital, and it's a life-changing event for them. But the bystander's sitting there feeling traumatized and probably very upset about what happened as well, because that's what they just witnessed. But they'll sit there thinking, there's no way I'm allowed to feel bad about this because that person just got assaulted and they're the one in pain. Well, I don't have a right to feel how I'm feeling. And we do that to ourselves all the time. But we do that to ourselves, that process, with very small things. I don't have a right to feel excited about this. I only just made my first 10,000. My goal is to make 1 million. I don't have a right to feel excited about this. So that I think that we do that all the time. We don't give ourselves the space to feel. But further than that, we don't even give ourselves the allowance to feel what we do feel. So we kind of lock ourselves in, and then it's just, well, got to move forward, open the next door.
That's a very good positioning, because I agree. I think you have an eye on the big goal, whatever that means. The big, it's over there, it's miles away, but I'm getting there. So every step on the way to that is irrelevant because I'm not there yet. Yeah, I can connect with that, I think. And I think that taking time to give yourself that permission to acknowledge it is important. And I think a learning from this conversation, certainly for me. Aside from journaling, JJ, which I think is something that is a habit that I certainly need to practice or address.
Me too.
Yeah, you're not perfect, right? One thing we've spoken or referenced to, and I said we get to it, is about accountability partners. Would you recommend an accountability partner? And what is the role of an accountability partner? And what should your relationship be with an accountability partner?
It's actually funny you're asking about this because a friend of mine we've both been meaning to start something, the same thing, this learning program. We've both been meaning to start it. And we've both been distracted and anxious and not being able to make time for it in our schedules. And he 2 days ago just texted me, all right, we're accountability partners. So it's just funny that you're saying this now in 2 days, I'm in the middle of a texting conversation with him about this. But I think maybe I would start with what it's not. Because if we're framing accountability through what we've been speaking about until now, it can't be a bully. Like, you can't be bullied by your friend into making sure you're doing what you need to do, because that's not accountable. You're responding to a bully as opposed to responding to your set of values. So I think where an accountability partner could be important, or is important, or could play a role in our ability to accomplish what we want to accomplish is when we've clearly identified for ourselves why it is that we're doing what we're doing, and that accountability partner has done the same, and we're able to support each other in that process as opposed to pressuring each other to make sure that we're doing it or to compete with each other. I think if there's that boundary of, I know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and we're coming together just to have a community, kind of a community connection that allows us to have that uplifting feeling of, okay, I know this person has my back in kind of keeping me in line with what I want to do, then I think it can be very effective.
And if someone, just to use that framing, if someone is coming to, let's say I'm playing the role of accountability lead, if you like, and there's someone coming to me and I'm their accountability partner, is there opportunity or benefit in that space, even though it's only two people, setting the rules of that space? You know, why are we here? What's okay to do? What's not okay to do? Do you define that? So the attendee, if you like, coming towards me, isn't coming to expect to be given a defined set of rules. This is what happens here. It's, let's make our own space, our own rules, and move that forwards.
Exactly. I think so. Because then you're accountable to the relationship, which is the two of you, as opposed to being accountable to the master, which is not really accountable. If going back to the accountability versus responsibility, now you're taking on a responsibility. Where's the accountability there? It's strictly answering to your taskmaster. I don't know if that's accountable.
Interesting. Yeah. And if someone, let's say you had a meeting with your partner about the program that you wanted to start, and at the end of that, you said, right, next week, what we're on next Thursday? By next Thursday, I'll have done this piece of research. That's my agreement to you. And then come Wednesday night, we've still not done it. Do we go back to that accountability partnership, knowing that we've not done what we do, or do we cancel the meeting?
No, I think I would understand why somebody would want to cancel the meeting. I get that. And if it's so personal and sensitive that you want to do that, maybe reevaluate how you're doing it. But I think go to it, and part of the accountability part of accountability in life is allowing yourself to be fully vulnerable with yourself, with others, with your relationships, with your work. And if we allow ourselves to be fully vulnerable, we create a space that we can utilize to hold ourselves accountable. So if you go to that meeting and you haven't done it yet, you haven't committed, you haven't fulfilled your research responsibilities from a week ago, or accountabilities, then you are remaining accountable to the relationship, because you're not running from what you feel is important for you. See, the task that you didn't fulfill is not the accountability. The accountability is knowing that this is what I believe I need to do. This is what I want to do. And being able to stay with that and stick to it, even when it feels uncomfortable, because it's something that comes from me as opposed to something that comes from somewhere else.
Yeah, and again, it's going back a little bit to the difference between accountability and responsibility. I guess in that example there, it might have been your responsibility to do the market research, but I'm going to go back and be held accountable by saying I've not managed to do it.
Yeah,
it's not you've not done your responsibility, but you're still holding yourself accountable. So in that sense, it's like, well, I still respect this space, but the responsibility is the task element, which I haven't achieved. And I think that's helped it sink in around the differences a bit between accountability and responsibility.
yeah.
And I just wanted to touch on, JJ's, before we head for a few takeaways and thoughts. If we are looking for an accountability partner, we've tried the journaling, great, I'm doing that. I'm talking to myself in the shower. I'm giving myself the permission to open up to those thoughts around, am I okay to feel like this? Great, I can do this on my own. I really like the idea of accountability partnerships. How do I find an accountability partner, and what makes a good one?
It's got to be somebody who you don't feel threatened by. Somebody who you feel you can be yourself around. I think we make a mistake of thinking that the people who are going to motivate us the most are the ones who are going to keep us moving, keep us marching ahead. And like the ones who are going to stand behind us and say, no, keep going, keep going, keep going. That's motivation. And I don't think that's the right truest form of motivation. Sure, it can motivate us. It can get us, it can create results. Yeah. But I think when we feel like we have a space where we're not threatened, and when we have a space where we can be totally connected in ourselves, that's probably the relationship that would be most conducive to accountability partnership.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned about the motivation piece, because I think that's what a lot of people might, when I said in the introduction, it's often overused as a word. I think people might misconstrue it with motivation. I need someone to, we hear things over here like, I need someone to give me a kick up the ass.
Yeah.
Can you hold me accountable? But from what I'm hearing here, that's not accountability. That's
right. No.
That's, as you sort of call it, motivation almost. I need someone to shout at me when I've done something wrong. Well,
yeah, I need punishment. I need punishment in order to keep me in line. Okay,
that's not accountability, though, is it? From what we discussed. No. What is that?
No.
Then?
That's a desire to be kept in line, which means that in a kind of weird way, there's something preventing us from giving ourselves the space to do what we want, which is weird because, again, you could be doing the thing that you want because you're getting kicked in the butt, but you're not actually doing it because you want to do it. You're doing it because somebody else is creating a situation or an environment where you need to do it. So it's not connected, and that will run out. That
Mm.
flame will flicker and you will lose that.
Because you've not prioritized it, you've not positioned it right. You're just saying, "Oh, I think I should do this. Can you kick me until I might do it?"
Exactly.
It's not accountability.
Yeah.
It's management almost. It's,
Yeah.
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 You're poking me. So I think there's some real. I mean, there's a lot of further reading and exploration to do. Certainly, that's opening my eyes around accountability and responsibility. I think is fascinating. The difference around that. The
That was
fact
a
we
great
can
question.
the fact we can misconstrue accountability with, for example, in that case, motivation, and the fact that someone's asking for motivation in the guise of accountability might connect back to the fact that they're not prioritizing what it is that you're telling them to do.
Yeah. Which seems so bizarre because they're doing what they want to do, and they're doing what they told you that they want to do, but it's
Still don't do it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. I mean, JJ, we're going to have to head for, I mean, there's so much to unpack from this conversation. It's been a real great exploration of accountability. I mean, for those listening who want to make a start, and you've referenced a few points already through, but if you could summarize your sort of key takeaways around this topic for someone that's new to accountability, what would you suggest they start to do? What are the sort of quickest wins? I'm not saying there's a silver bullet, there isn't a quick win, but what would you take from this conversation that we can start to run with as a listener moving forward?
It sounds funny because it's maybe it's another intangible thing, but we tend to, as people, assuming most people are decent, we tend to have a desire to make others feel good, especially our families, those closest to us. Even the bad apples want to take care of their family. You know, like the classic mob boss. He's all over his family. And yet we don't extend that same kindness or desire to be accepted or that same empathy or compassion to ourselves. We don't relate to ourselves that way. So I think a good place to start, like an easy way in, maybe it's not easy, but a simple way to look at it is, how do I treat myself? Do I treat myself like the taskmaster, or do I treat myself like the accountability partner? And if I'm treating myself like the accountability partner, there's a lot more room for connected growth. And when I treat myself like the taskmaster, I'm really just bullying myself, and like I said before, the flame will flicker, and it doesn't leave us better. It leaves us with a bunch of accomplishments that don't connect to a source, and that can be very painful. So I think it's just look at yourself like you want to look at your children, like you want to look at your wife. You're deserving of that same love, of that same compassion, of that same empathy. And if we start there, our next steps can filter through that, and we can start to build a certain level of accountability because we have that foundation of emotional awareness and understanding for ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's a great challenge to a lot of us, because we do, as we reference, sleepwalk. We do react. We do the should gremlin tasks, the shoulders, as you referenced to. That's what we get stuck in, and we forget a sense of ourselves. You know, I often say in the 4 areas of dad life, we have work life, we had family life, money life, self life is always the first one to go, and we don't connect well enough with how we should do. Probably because we don't know how to, and I think what you've done is help shed some light on that, about where we can start doing that. You know, are you being a taskmaster to yourself? Are you bullying yourself? I think it's a great challenge that probably a lot of people might not like the answer to, but we've got to start. We've got to make a start. Listen, JJ, where can we find out more about your work and your upcoming projects and journey? Because your content's excellent that I've seen on social media and your website, and I think you're at the start of your journey as well. It certainly has been a dad. Congratulations again on that. I mean, what's next for you, and where can we follow your work?
So I have a website, www.emmanueltherapy.com, where I have a blog. I try to blog once a month, but sometimes I don't. But I do a lot about kind of the topics we've covered today. A lot about emotional awareness, accountability, empathy, compassion. And I'm on LinkedIn. And I also just recently started a podcast called Unleash the Gentleman. And what I really appreciate your podcast here, your show, because I think I'm trying to do a similar thing, which is to just give space to men to discuss things that men don't usually discuss. That's it. Just to be an example, just to give people the just to give men the space to be emotional and to discuss emotions in a world that doesn't necessarily give us that space. So that's Unleash the Gentleman. It's on Spotify, it's on Amazon Music, it'll be on Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. So that's where you can find my stuff.
Brilliant. You're well spread, JJ. Excellent. Listen, it's been a really eye-opening conversation, and thank you for taking the time and being so considered and articulate in your responses. I think there's some tremendous value in that, and thank you for sharing that. And I look forward to following your journey, JJ. Thank you very much, sir, and more. We'll stay connected for sure.
Definitely, thank you. I really enjoyed this.
Brilliant. Take care.